Thank you guys for joining. I want to talk with you today about guilt versus shame. For those who don't really know what I'm doing, I'm a certified life transformation coach, a public speaker, as well as emotions clearing practitioner and an author. So one of my expertise is in the area of emotions. Especially that I work mostly with empath or so-called empath-warrior. They're a little bit of a difference. And so emotions are our foundation to how we communicate with each other, not just for empath, but for everyone. And okay, so emotions, what we have done with emotions is we put them in categories so we can literally hold people accountable to how they feel. They're bad, apparently bad and good emotions, but they really are not. They're nothing. They're just emotions. And we determine how we want to experience emotions in our life. Unfortunately, we have put them in boxes and labels so we can control each other and authority controlling those underneath us. So I am here to clean up the relationship that we have with emotions a little bit and actually honor our emotions. And that means all of them, because none of them are bad or good. Some of them just have a lower and some of them have a higher vibration. And we just need to understand their messages. Okay, so today I want to talk about guilt and shame because those emotions are the two emotions why most people come to me and why most people have mental health issues and why our society is where we're at today. Guilt, there are two different types of guilt. There's unhealthy guilt and there's healthy guilt. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can. And I found something really cool. It's from the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine, which I really like their content. But they gave me something great that I can share with you so I don't have to go too deep because then it would take too long. So there's some helpful guilt and unhelpful guilt, healthy and unhealthy guilt. Let's talk about that first. The definition of healthy guilt or helpful guilt is when we know we did something wrong and we want to correct it. And did you know, for example, that healthy guilt already develops between the age of 3 and 6 years old, which is quite interesting. Already children at that age understand when they did something wrong, then they feel guilty and they want to correct it. Helpful guilt is actually great because it is a message, or when we feel guilty, it is the message of integrity, bringing us back to an ethical and morally acceptable with each other, where we can correct our behavior towards each other. So I don't want to talk too much about the helpful guilt because we are mostly aware of that. Like that's when often comes in disciplining your children, that is helpful guilt. When we say, hey, this was really not nice, then they feel bad about it and then they want to correct it. That's actually a good thing because it corrects our behavior and where we want to go and how we want to communicate and how we want to experience each other's company. So that helps create relationships actually. Now then there's this unhelpful guilt, the unhealthy side of guilt. That is when everything just becomes wrong, right? Everything just becomes wrong. When you have, and I honestly have to say something, I'm guilty because when you say too much no to your children, they create an unhealthy relationship to guilt because everything they do is not good enough or is not right. And so you know that when unhealthy guilt is when people continuously talk to you with the question mark at the end. No matter what they say, there's always this, am I right? Do I have to improve something? Do I have to change something? Like it's always like this up in your sentence and the tone, how they talk to you. That is unhealthy guilt. Unhelpful guilt is guilt caused by actions or behaviors that break irrationally high standards. So if you're someone who has very, very high standards and your children have to live up to those standards, you will find them eventually questioning everything they hear and do and see. And so you hear that in their speaking. And they become very they become usually very withdrawn. People are usually very withdrawn and very careful in what they say. Shy, some people would consider it shy, because they think everything they do is not considered as the high standard that they're used to, and they might be doing something wrong. So we need to be careful that we understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy guilt. Healthy guilt is considered correcting your behavior. For example, if you have to apologize, we teach that to our children. And then unhealthy guilt is irrationally high standard that we set for other people as well as for our own self. If our standards are too high, then we often fall into unhealthy guilt. And that is a spiral down that we often have a problem getting out to. Like, everything is wrong with me. I can't do anything right. I can't handle anything. There's just everything wrong with me. And then there's shame. And shame, I think, is a very important one that I want to talk with you a little bit more about, because shame shows up more in the collective. Shame is an intensely painful feeling of being fundamentally flawed. So as a society, if you look at history, no matter what your background is or what your skin color is, there's always been the shaming. You should be ashamed of yourself to act like this. You should be ashamed of yourself to look like this. You should be ashamed to even consider that you can sit there. And so over all of those generations, we have created a shame society worldwide. That's not just the US, it's worldwide. We look at different nations, at different traditions in the way of shame. There's something wrong with you. You are flawed. And as we know, especially when we raise children, we live up to the expectation. So if, for example, a generation always hears, that's all you're good for, or you're flawed, or how dare you should be ashamed. They're like all those kind of words, like the way we interact with people. If discrimination is part of shame, racism is part of shaming other people. You're a different race, therefore you are. And that has been so ingrained into us that it becomes more and more of a problem. So let's see what they here said in their notes from the Behavioral Medicine Institute. I haven't even quite read all through that. Yeah, we see ourselves as unworthy and deeply flawed. So even if you have generations that on the outside are like, I am not unworthy. I am here. I am me. This is me. And I am presenting who I am. There's still deep down that generational shame. And as you have heard me talk about trapped emotions already, if you have heard me talk about shame already, about trapped emotions before, there's a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about how trapped emotions are inherited, or some of them are inherited and others are created during a birth. Like, for example, if the mother during the pregnancy feels shame towards herself, most likely that is being transferred over to the child. And the child already grows up in that knowing there is something wrong with me. Because the mother was constantly thinking, I'm too fat, I'm flawed, I'm unworthy, I shouldn't be doing this. Like all the shameful behavior thinking that we have integrated, or that we have learned, that we actually have learned. And then automatically that emotion of shame already is being transferred to the child. So that is how generational trapped emotions are being explained. So if you have, for example, with our society, if you have groups of people, and I really hate labeling and putting people in groups and boxes, but if you see how we're racially are with each other, that shame is being continuously from generation to generation to generation being, now I'm missing the word. It's being transferred. Like literally, you are inheriting that trapped shame emotion because you are acting accordingly. So even now, when we have all those movements going on, like Oprah was going with time is up, or our relationship towards men, like even if you see it in that relationship where men have over generations, there has been somehow the stigma been going on, women are flawed, you should be in the kitchen, you are unworthy to do anything else. That kind of thinking has been stored into our DNA over generations. If you are a Black American, or even Black in general in the world, it's always called third world, right? You live in a third world. You are unworthy of more. You are unworthy of being treated right and just. You are flawed. You don't look like me. You don't act like me. Those are not consciously thinking and behaviors that we are aware of. We see the injustice happening. We get mad. We get angry. We see the injustice. We want to start a movement. But internally, that's something that's subconsciously still sitting within our DNA is the shame. What if they are right? I can't speak up because he is right. I'm unworthy. And even though he or she abuses me, I can't speak up because I'm unworthy. And it is all rooted into generations of shameful behavior, shaming other people. And when we have this within each other, within ourselves, we automatically also give that further to everyone else. If we do it consciously, if we want to do it or not, it doesn't matter. It is in our DNA because, again, as you heard me talk, emotions or everything is energy. Therefore, emotions are also energy and can get trapped in our body. And another thing, you have heard me say that before, over 90% of mental, physical, and emotional illnesses are related to trapped emotions. So with this shame, and I think we need to become more and more aware of that the situations that we're in, we can only break up, not by creating bigger movements and like, I am done, I am ready, and how dare you, like those kind of movements don't help us. Because the shame, the trapped emotion of shame from over generations to generations, that's in there, we're just pushing then on the other person. So, for example, if we really, and I know for some people it's hard to understand the way I think. I am not, some people think you're too naive. Yeah, no, I'm just having a broader view. Like when I don't know how to explain how I can think, but that's one reason why I call my world vision and my group World Visionaries United, because we think differently. We can see it from a bird's eye view, and then we can take a look and like, okay, if you move this person here and this person there, and then we're gonna have the whole puzzle mixing and working together, okay? So, for example, you have a husband who abuses his wife, and he keeps telling her, you're unworthy. I can do whatever I want to do with you. You're unworthy, you are flawed, that's why you can't leave the house. Like those deep beliefs that she starts to believe about herself are being trapped inside of her unless she really goes through an intense healing process. So when this woman suddenly decides to break out of this relationship and says, I am done, I have enough of what I've been told, I am done being abused, goes out. But most of the time we don't seek the actual healing to really, and healing and change only comes from a heart level, when we can come from a place of forgiveness, love. And again, that's hard when you have someone in front of you that has abused you for years or generations, even if you look at different groups in our society, right? It's hard. But I also know that this is the only way we can really see change in our society. Because now when this woman breaks up, and it's not only an example, because you can turn that around, you can exchange it for any situations where shame was within that relationship. Now this woman leaves and says, I have enough. And then we start a movement against men and we're putting shame. You are shameful. You should be ashamed of your behavior. And it just keeps triggering back and forth and back. And it's not helping us. And I see it now. I'm raising a boy, and sometimes I'm here and sitting, I'm like, okay, I love how women are standing up now for themselves. And I loved how the Me Too and how it suddenly came up. Like, we're no longer silent. But before we can change, we have to heal. And we can only do that together. If we come from a place of bitterness and rebelling against something, we just turn the sides. And eventually, it's going to be turned again. And we will never actually break up the pattern that we're stuck in. So shame is a very powerful emotion. Shame is a very, it's a low vibrating emotion. And for us to heal, we have to make peace with the abuser. Even if that means other groups of people, black versus white versus red. And you know who is really good at that? I have never seen a group of people who are so incredibly forgiving, considering everything that's happened to them. And you know why? Because they're spiritually so connected that healing is a priority for them. They see the injustice. That doesn't mean that they can't call it out and say, hey, this is not working. We have to stand up for it. But healing comes first for them as a group. And I've done a lot of reading, and I'm so fascinated. I mean, I love their culture because it's about group, it's about community, and again, it is about healing. And from that place of healing, they're making a difference. If we want it or not, you saw it with the pipeline Standing Rock. They only prayed, and people started to feel so threatened by them that they had to respond with power and force. And they still stood and prayed. It's the vibration that they were sending out. Okay, they approved the pipeline. Well, let's not talk about that. But overall, if you look at, like, from my bird's eye view, if you see it, you can see how they started a process of healing within other people who joined them in that, in this movement, because healing is it's the priority for them as a society, as a nation. And I love it. I'm so fascinated by their stories. And yeah, Christian might be like, well, they're having gods and spirits and I don't know what. Well, you know what? They're acting more spiritual than most Christians do. Because they're coming from that place of healing, forgiveness, and love. Isn't that what Jesus told us? Like, isn't that how he acts with other people? And I think that's something to think about. Shame is the number one emotion, trapped emotion, why people come to me, why problems show up in our society. And before we start any kind of movement, even if it's time is up, hashtag speak your truth. What does that actually mean? We throw those words around like, speak your truth. Do whatever you want to do. Say what you want to do. No, speak your truth. There's just one truth. There's just one truth. And it's what Jesus taught us. And that is love. God is love. The spiritual journey. That is your truth. So speak your truth actually means heal before you speak. And trust me, before I even came to the United States, I had a really interesting picture about Americans. I saw them as drama queens and kings. I judged very harshly, and I never was able to find my place. Like, for me, and here's something that might be interesting to you, especially Americans who listen. I grew up in the DDR, East Germany. So we grew up former communist, and it wasn't obviously our fault, so don't even get at me. But once the wall came down, Americans took over. And we felt not just that Soviets took over our country, but then on the other hand, it was Americans. And so that the big saying was for us, everything is being Americanized. And you started to have this resentment towards a nation, even though there was some admiration as well, but there was also resentment. Like, now we got rid of them. Now you're trying to push that on us. And I think East Germany even more has a lot of values. If you go to Germany, you feel the difference between the people who grew up in East and grew up in West. West adapted to the Americanism much more than the East, because we're like, who are we? I don't wanna be those from the East, and I don't want to be those from the West. And so there was quite some resentment inside of me. And again, that shaming. I was always felt like there must be something wrong with us if we need to be so controlled by everyone. And I came here and I could feel it in my relationships with other people. I was like, like every time I could feel I could hear my mind trying to find the flaws in them and shaming them. You should be ashamed for always making it a drama. You should be ashamed in how much you waste stuff. Okay, there might be some truth behind that, but no, really. But it was my thinking. And so through my coaching training, I had to go through a very intense healing process with a nation that I felt like took even more away from us than gave us. Everything was Americanized, right? And so I can understand when people talk about discrimination, like where we fight at each other and against each other, even though maybe some of them didn't even mean anything bad about it. But I just put it in my box of Americans. That's exactly them. I don't know if I like them. I know I have to be here because I had this dream and God somehow wanted me to be here. Whatever. And I went through this healing process, and I could let go of some of that shame that I experienced. And with the work, releasing trapped emotions, some of the shame was really deep, and it took me a while to let it go. And once I did, now I can take a look at it from a distance. Like, is that the truth? Is it just for me to call out the injustice, but not just, no. That's when my brain switches to German. Hold on. Judging, not judging the person, the individual, but the action. And I think that's something we need to learn. We can acknowledge and call out the actions, but not the person, the individual. And for me, as I told you, for me, a very great gift is to see colors around people. And what that means, that the whole time, like my whole life, I was like, why am I seeing everything in color? And for me, it's when I work with people, it's like their heart is sending out a vibration, a frequency to me that my brain translates into color. And each color has a specific meaning due to their vibration as well. And so it doesn't matter to me on the outside what you look like, for me to see you as an individual, because I only receive the vibration from your heart, and I would assume that your heart works the same way as mine. If that's wrong, let me know, because then I might have to go back to biology class and learn something else. Maybe I missed that class. I don't know. But this is how I experience the world. And again, before we can create a movement that really changes things and not just a rebellion, we have to heal. And it starts with you. If you make that decision, like, you know what, before I go out and before I follow that rebellion, I need to really heal. Because when we come from a place of bitterness, we just switch roles. And the shaming continues as long as someone decides to break it up. And right now, at this point, shame has been inherited. It has been given on to each generation every time. So that's what I want to talk about with you, guilt versus shame, and how shame is impacting our society. I think those who listened were able to get something out of it and kind of like, maybe there's something that needs to be healed inside of me, something that I have to work through. Even if it has nothing to do with you specifically, it really can have something to do with your parents or your grandparents or great-grandparents or even before that. If you feel really connected to your history, then this can come from your history from hundreds of years ago. So if anyone is interested in digging a little deeper into that, let me know. As I said, I've been doing that for a while now with the trapped emotions, and it has been incredible. I mean, my heart always jumps up a little beat higher, which beats a little faster when I see people respond to releasing those and the freedom that they suddenly experience, that they can break through. And I think that's literally, like, that's my mission that I'm on.